In 2023, RuneScape 3 has had some of the largest updates that it has ever seen, most recent of which was the first brand new full combat style to ever have been introduced to any version of RuneScape, Necromancy. Now, RuneScape has been a game that I've played even before World of Warcraft, and though RuneScape split into Old School and RuneScape 3 a long time ago now, I still hop back into both versions of the game now and again. In today's video, I'm going to be delving into RuneScape 3 in 2023, going over the recent major updates, considering the positives and negatives, and ultimately giving my thoughts on the current state of the game. Let's start off with the big news then, an entirely new combat style, Necromancy. Now, you might hear this and think, hold on, RuneScape 3 already has summoning, isn't that going to be kind of similar? And the answer is no, not at all. Summoning is much more of a supportive skill in combat, kind of like your prayers. Necromancy, on the other hand, is its whole own thing, and unlike summoning, this combat style does damage. You can get started on the quest to learn Necromancy the moment that you log into the game, and despite it being a full-on new combat style, some of the best experience per hour will actually be coming from skilling instead, which is unique for a combat style and allows accounts of all types to train up this skill. The skilling portion is done through rituals, which involves setting up a site with various glyphs and candles and then effectively enchanting a certain item. Rituals are needed for materials to craft necromancy armor, to make impure essence for necro-specific spells, to contribute to the Well of Souls, and much more. And even if you are more of a combat-focused person, you are going to have to do rituals for a number of reasons. The Well of Souls I just mentioned functions kind of as a talent tree for necromancy, where through rituals you fill the well up, and through combat you earn talent points to spend. Eventually you will unlock everything though, it's just up to you what you want first. And some of your most powerful abilities are unlocked through the Soul Well, so it's vital to do. Combat-wise, necromancy has plenty of abilities which deal heavy damage, and of course the ability to summon the undead to aid you in combat. There are currently 3 summons with more planned for the future. There are also incantations. This is your necromancy spellbook, which needs a new set of runes to use. Through this you can do things such as extending the duration of your summons at the cost of life points, using defensive abilities without a shield equipped, and much more. On top of that, there's a ton of new quests with this release, a new area to explore, a new task set that goes up to medium at the moment, and a lot more. Necromancy has truly added a ton into the game. It's also worth bringing up here that Necromancy is not only the first new combat skill, but also a notable change from how combat usually is in this game, and in a positive way at that. Simply put, it's significantly easier to get good results PVMing with this combat style compared to all the others, where to get the same damage output you need to be some gigabrain StarCraft 2 APM level player who can manage insane rotations, item swapping, ability inputs, and boss mechanics. In my last RuneScape 3 review in 2022, I said combat at a high level was confusing and too hard to manage, so I am happy to see this change. There has also been talk that necromancy should be the new standard for RuneScape 3 combat, and I'm just hopeful that Jagex can stick to this combat style being more straightforwards, and that when we get new summons, items, incantations, and so on, it doesn't just become another confusing mess. All in all though, it's been a great skill release and a lot of fun. It does make the other combat styles kind of hard to use when you can get such good results from Necromancy though. But that's it for the new skill. Let's move on because there's plenty more to talk about. Another huge update to RuneScape 3, albeit not quite so recent mind you, is that you can now toggle PvP in the wilderness off entirely. There is an NPC called Vala near the wilderness ditch just northeast of Edgeville who will allow you to do this. There was a time and a place where RuneScape as a whole was a huge PvP focused game. When I started playing it, that's pretty much all I did, but that time was many years ago now. In my 2022 review, I couldn't recommend the game for PvP, and now that Jagex have introduced an option to just turn it off, they can worry a bit less about having to balance things around this often problematic area of the game. With the effective PvP removal, there are now many more monsters in the wilderness, quests that take place there, and flash events that pop up every hour where you and other players complete objectives. You can also teleport to and from anywhere in the wilderness without the teleblock restrictions beyond level 20 or 30 anymore. It does feel a bit strange actually taking loads of gear into the wild, but you do get used to it. And the best bit about it, you don't have to bank your gear when you're doing clue steps in the wilderness anymore. Speaking of things which are gone, the Duel Arena has also been removed from the game. This happened around the same time in both versions of RuneScape actually, and Old School did handle it differently I should say, but in RuneScape 3 it's full on gone, you wouldn't know it was ever there. It's been replaced by a new area called Het's Oasis, which has a number of quests, story progression, and skilling areas. Problems surrounding real money trading, gambling and scamming have unfortunately always been synonymous with the Duel Arena, though much like the wilderness, it's very much changed forever now. One final major quality of life update in RuneScape 3, which is just an overall positive I think, is that the max cash stack has been increased from just over 2.1 billion to now being 2.1 quintillion, which is a 1 billion, I think? It's a big number, okay, let's just say that much. The reason this happened is that there were tons of items that were worth well in excess of the old gold cap, so you could never buy them on the Grand Exchange and you had to resort to trading combinations of items with other players. It was just kind of messy. Now you can use the GE for pretty much anything. And in case you're wondering, nothing is worth anywhere near this volume of gold. Jagex just went super mega overkill on increasing the gold cap to future-proof it, I suppose. While these are some of the larger updates that have taken place, the world of RuneScape is constantly being updated, which as a returning player can often be something that's quite difficult to come back to simply because there is just so much stuff to do. A feature that can be quite helpful here is the fact that the quest log can be sorted to show the release of quests in various different orders, including release date, their length, the lore period they took place in, and so on. Whatever there is to do in RuneScape, quests are always a decent point to get back into the game. They will give you something to do and will likely give you an idea of something else that you want to work towards in the future. And if there is one thing that RuneScape does well, it's that feeling that there is always something else to do. You'll start off wanting to do one thing, then you'll find out in order to access that you have to have done something else, and before you know it you're grinding a boss for a drop without really knowing why you got there. Alternatively, if you did want something a bit more guided, there is a pathway guide for gearing Iron Men accounts on the RuneScape wiki, and I know it's designed with Iron Men in mind, but honestly, it's going to be pretty useful in general if you want to try and track down something that's going to be beneficial for whatever level your character is at. I'll just scroll down on the page till you find something you don't have and go and do that. RuneScape very much is a game you need to take one step at a time due to how expansive it is. This game's been out for many years now, and it doesn't do expansions, so there is simply an enormous amount of content layered on top of one another. In fact, if you wanted an MMO where you could fully invest yourself into a main character and not have to care about alts or needing to reroll to see how other classes play, RuneScape 3 is very good for that. You can do everything on one character. And then there is getting into the game's combat, which at first can also be extremely overwhelming. I will say this has improved with the release of Necromancy, but it's still not all that simple. There are essentially 3 different settings for combat in RuneScape 3. There is Legacy, which is basically what exists in old school RuneScape. You click something, your character auto-attacks until the thing is gone, and repeat. It does have its niche uses in the game, but is generally very rarely used, and I wouldn't recommend playing with this. Next is Revolution. Now this is the gateway into getting to grips with RuneScape 3 combat. Revolution, or just Revo, will auto-fire your abilities according to their order on your action bar. The yellow highlight around your abilities will show which ones will be used automatically. You can set this so it will just use your basic abilities, your thresholds, which require 50% adrenaline, or even alternates that require 100% adrenaline. A mix of Revolution for basic abilities and manual for thresholds and above is something that I would recommend doing if you want to begin improving on RuneScape 3's combat. There is also a section on the wiki for setting up revolution bars so that you have something good to start off with. Finally, there is a manual, which is what it says it is. You are in charge of everything. Once you start getting into later game bosses, the benefits of manual start to heavily outweigh revolution, as you're much more accurately able to time burst damage, your defensives, animation cancelling, and much more. If you are looking for more information on combat, there is the insanely in-depth PvME hub, which goes into more detail than I even know what to do with, but has everything PvM on it from starting to doing the hardest content in the game. On the non-combat side of things, RuneScape 3 remains something which can easily be a second screen activity or just something which you grind passively. Skills such as mining and smithing were reworked a long time ago now, so there is less running to and from the bank and more time just mining and working metal. Archaeology was added a few years back too. This skill has you digging into the past of many of Gillenor's most influential factions, restoring artifacts and solving ancient mysteries. Plenty of skills now go all the way up to level 120 as well. It's kind of the new 99, and when 99 is about 13 million XP, 120 is about 104 million. So it's still a fair old grind. Skills that go to 120 include Dungeoneering, Farming, Slayer, Herblore, Archaeology, Invention, and Necromancy. Graphically, the game is still hit and miss at times. Since RuneScape doesn't do vertical progression for content, there's a lot of very old models which are just more than a little bit jarring next to the newer ones, shall we say. But it often does get it right, and the use of different skyboxes and just the pure size of the world add a lot of depth to the experience that you get as a whole. There is truly so much that I could say about this game. I'm just going to try and get out some positives and negatives and then we can finish up. On the positive, the updated or newer release areas of the game look really good in general. RuneScape 3 probably has one of the largest original soundtracks in any online game. The OST is absolutely enormous. Necromancy does show hope for the future of other combat styles. The content structure in RuneScape where they don't do expansions means you're never strictly behind, you're just kind of at the point where you're at. Your gear will still be relevant for appropriate level challenges. There is an incredible amount of content in this game. You can really invest into one character, and there will be thousands of hours of stuff to do. There's tons of new ways to train skills. Mining and smithing had their rework as mentioned to make them more engaging, and there's very satisfying long-term character progression. The RuneScape 3 team keep releasing great new skills, particularly Invention, Archaeology, and most recently, Necromancy. Questing is unique in RuneScape as a whole across the MMO genre. There's no kill and collect. Instead, there's many different stories which are sorted in your quest journal so you can experience things in an order which makes sense. It's also very solo player friendly. There is little content in the game that requires a group, and even then if you're good enough you can solo just about anything. On the negative side, top of the list has to be the fact that microtransactions or MTX are pushed heavily in this game. You can avoid it if you're an Iron Man, but if you're not, you're going to get reminded about MTX every single day. You are given access to a ton of the MTX stuff for free though just by playing the game as a regular character. There are also double XP events that happen multiple times per year too now. Well, I don't think there's really that much pressure to use the microtransactions, but they definitely make a lot of money off them. RuneScape 3 also sells convenience, such as extra bank spaces, which once you start reaching a higher level character, you realize that you're going to need them. There's an odd mix of art directions between newer and older content and models, which is something that's constantly being updated, but it is a little bit jarring. The player avatar refresh was also shelved earlier this year. This was a huge project aimed at updating how our in-game characters look, which seeing how they are at the moment is something which is quite frankly sorely needed in the game. The fact that it's taken a backbench once again has to go into a negative for me, and it is something that I hope Jagex come back to, because when you compare NPCs to our characters, the difference is enormous. The older combat styles feel very hit and miss. They can be fun, but the combination of click to move and the tick-based system RuneScape works on makes things feel clunky, and there's a general lack of clarity in combat. It's often unclear when you will receive damage, where you're going to surge or escape to, how many enemies will be affected by your AoE, and so on. Combat is the main reason I end up stopping playing when I do, often due to frustration with it. And I think whilst RuneScape keeps this whole tick-based action format in place, this is never going to truly change. And that's not happening without a decade of development and a RuneScape-obsessed billionaire who wants to throw money into a pit. Again, Necromancy does improve on this, but I still think it's something that has to be said about the combat. The UI and options menu are extremely confusing and user-unfriendly. They're just way too complicated. It's fine once you've set everything up and you know where everything is, but when you come back to the game or you start playing the game, you're going to be spending hours going through the user interface. If I was getting back into RuneScape 3 again, I would seriously look up a guide on user interface just to get familiar with it. Overall, despite there being underlying issues with RuneScape 3, I think it is a good time to give it a try if you have been considering it. Necromancy is well worth a go, and it may just be the thing that gets you into higher level PvM content, which used to seem too challenging. If you want a casual grinding game with long-term character progression, RuneScape 3 has just about always been that exact game to answer that demand, and the questing within the game remains unique for the genre. I feel like there's always more to say about RuneScape 3, but those are the main points I've decided to cover for the video, and for this game progressing well into 2023. Let me know what you thought though. Did I cover all the main points for the current state of the game? Is there anything else that I should have included? Do feel free to drop it down below. And if you made it to the end, there may just be some other reviews of MMOs that I've been playing in the background to follow up. Either way, as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.